Today, the 139 riders in the Tour de France travel through 3 countries. They set out from Andorra and race into Spain. And then they climb their way back into France, where the stage stays all day in the Pyrenees. Hello and welcome back to our coverage of the Tour de France. Well, the riders had their rest day in Andorra. Today they faced their longest and hardest day here in the Pyrenees. The riders will leave Andorra and spend over 160 kilometres in Spain, where they'll climb 2 mountains. Then they'll come into France via the giant Col de Portillon, which will bring them on to the Col de Peyresourde. And then they'll finish on the climb of the Pla d'Ader, high above the village of Soulan. It'll be a viciously hard day. Now let's remind ourselves of the overall situation this morning. Miguel Indurain leading Alvaro Mejia by 3 minutes and 23 seconds. Zenon Jaskulja is 3rd. Tony Rominger, the king of the mountains at the moment, is 4th. And Bjarne Riis lies in 5th place. Phil Anderson, so be it, 1.5 hours behind Indurain, is in 89th position. Well, I'm at the finishing line here now, high above that village of Saint-Lary-Soulan. Alan Piper is still at the start in Andorra.
L'année passée, vous êtes le grand chef de Tour de France avec Indurain. Et cette année, la condition n'est pas comme l'année passée. Qu'est-ce que c'est la raison?
Mais c'est pas beaucoup de moins de l'année dernière, mais cette année, il y a plusieurs coureurs qui marchent plus fort. Et alors, c'est difficile de faire de grandes courses.
Et dans les Alpes, tu as vu une mauvaise journée que tu as perdu 8 minutes, et ça, c'est la grande différence. Comment ça arrive, cette journée-là?
C'est après les jours de repos, pour moi, ça passe mal, et surtout quand il y a les grandes montagnes. J'espère aujourd'hui de marcher mieux. Autrement, c'est notre journée très mal. Et je pense que sans les 8 minutes que j'ai perdu là, la classifique pour moi, c'est mieux. Mais j'ai trouvé une journée très mal.
Alors aujourd'hui, peut-être on va voir Il Diablo encore?
Mais j'espère surtout pour moi, pour gagner une étape. Je pense que pour moi, c'est une grande chose.
Merci. Tony, how are you feeling this morning with another big mountain stage coming up?
I hope better than the other day, but we will see. We will see how it is passing the day today.
You're not worried about having 2 more hard stages? You're not feeling tired at all?
Oh, no, I'm not really feeling tired now, but this day was a day off, but I think the stages are too long for a day like this in the mountains.
You've tried every tactic up until now to get away and make some time up. Do you think you'll have to change your tactic at all today to do something different?
No, I don't have to change the tactic. I have only to be a little bit stronger, then it's easy. But when I'm going like the other days and he's also going like that, then I can't go away. I have to be a little bit stronger. I have to train more.
Thank you.
It's days like this, you know, and I'm glad I'm not a cyclist anymore, and I know Alan Piper didn't look forward to these days in the mountains either. Well, without more ado, let's go now and join the action on this second full day in the Pyrenees.
A cold start for the riders this morning, 7 degrees Celsius in the valley of Andorra. But that will change later in the day as the sun comes out and heats up the valleys to 25 degrees Celsius. But the big problem for the riders is when they go over the top of these peaks, it's going to be 8 degrees C, and that'll cause problems on the descent, again with that chill factor.
And the chance for 2 great sporting rivals to enjoy the early neutralised formation. Tony Rominger here talking with the yellow jersey Miguel Indurain. Well, it could be a day of decision, but they're friends at least at the moment. The field rolling through magnificent scenery, and you can forgive them for all staying together, rather like a touring ride at the moment, because the hills here make it an absolutely marvellous backdrop. The riders now are coming up the top of the Collado del Canto. It's 11:15 in the morning. Tony Rominger showing a clean pair of wheels to Claudio Chiappucci and David Cassani there in 3rd place. And bike's not the only mode of transport here in the Pyrenees. If you haven't got a bike, well, why not have a horse? 1 o'clock now, the next challenge of the day, the Col de la Benagua in Spain, 118 kilometres covered, and Rominger in action again ahead of Cassani, Inaki Gaston, a small elite group breaking clear of the field at the top of the climb. And now the riders are coming up to the top of the Col de Portillon. It's goodbye to Spain and back into France, and Tony Rominger again leading over the top, this time from Miguel Indurain. Now on the descent down into Luchon, and as the two leaders have formed on the descent, we're in Luchon itself, and Claudio Chiappucci leading Massimo Girotto at the feeding station, and Girotto there not taking that feeding bag at all well. And behind the two leaders, Girotto and Chiappucci, there's now a chase group forming. And now we're about 4 kilometers from the top of the Col de Peyresourde, and this is Massimo Girotto, and this is the man himself, Claudio Chiappucci. He's now at last free of Indurain, but not by very much, Paul, because Indurain is about half a minute back in a group of 8 riders.
And he's not chasing very much at the moment, Indurain, because that's not his job. His job is to watch Tony Rominger, who started to attack on the climb just before we came down into Luchon, the Col de Portillon. And in fact, so violent was that attack that it dragged away the top 6 riders in the overall classification at the moment. And we will surely have a sort out on the final climb up here to Pla d'Adet. This is the chase group of riders a little bit further down the climb. And there, the rider on the front is the Scot, Robert Miller. He's always shown well in the Pyrenean Mountains, but he's a little bit further back down the mountain today, suffering a bit. That is the yellow jersey group of Miguel Indurain. And further up the mountain, the 2 riders, the 2 leaders, Claudio Chiappucci and Massimo Girotto.
But this has been another great Tour de France for Italy. And now, looking a little bit more determined, Claudio Chiappucci. Once over the top, he will descend very quickly. He's a superb descender. He probably will gain time on the way downhill if he can stay away from this group. Girotto sitting there, rode his first Tour in 1987, Massimo Girotto, and he wasn't promising too much that year. He finished 109th, but then he came with 2 stage wins, one, as Paul Sherman said, at Guzenej, and then the next one came in 1990 when we raced into Geneva.
Strangely enough, it wasn't very long ago, in fact last year, that these 2 riders were in fact on the same Carrera team. Girotto left with his friend Giancarlo Perini to go across to the ZG Mobili team only this winter.
And there's Indurain sitting on the wheel there of Roberto Conti.
Well, it's almost certainly going to be a general regrouping of these 2 groups on the descent there, and it might be an advantage for Claudio Chiappucci to move clear on the descent, because whenever 2 groups come together, there's always a little bit of pausing to see what's going on for people to assess the situation, and it may be then that these 2 riders we're looking at now, Girotto and Claudio Chiappucci, have the chance to increase their lead, which is still hovering around the 30-second mark, up to around 1 minute.
Col de Peyresourde, and there's the gradient on the right, 7.1%, during a stretch of 12.8 kilometers. And now it's 1 kilometer to go to the summit. And Chiappucci has led all of the way up. He's been scoring steadily in the mountains today, but not as well as Tony Rominger. Rominger consolidating his overall lead in the race for the polka dot jersey competition. And those who've been following us on the tour over the last few days, we remember that Graham O'Brien, the Scottish amateur rider who set the hour record in Norway last Saturday, and Chris Boardman has confirmed, the Olympic champion, he will attack it at Bordeaux this Friday when the Tour de France comes into Bordeaux, just by the finishing line there. And it sounds like he's going to schedule for the magic 52 kilometers in the hour. Conti still setting the pace. Indurain, as always, just sits there and watches and matches the effort, but slowly and surely that second group is going to make contact, probably in the last kilometre of the climb. Now, Il Diavolo, the devil, as Chiappucci loves to be called, is now coming up towards the summit of the Col de Peyresourde.
But just before he gets to the summit, I have to tell you one little anecdote which I found quite amusing, is when he got married just recently and changed addresses, he sent out a card to all his friends saying, El Diavolo has moved house.
6¼ hours today, and there's still plenty of time before the finish, I'm afraid, and no challenge to Claudio, who comes over the top first, and followed by Massimo Girotto, who looks at him as more or less to indicate, are we going to keep going down the hill together? And then no big sprint there either for the places. It looks as though Rominger is going to take third, so he scores well again, and continues to build his lead in the King of the Mountains. 20 seconds, the time gap.
To be in the draw, entry
Now, is Indurain feeling the pressure, Paul? His face looks to me as though it might well be today. We don't normally see him get out of the saddle.
Well,
look at this.
This is what I was waiting for ever since the bottom of the climb, an attack to come from Tony Rominger. And it looks to me as if Indurain is suffering a little bit to try and get onto the wheel there, Rominger. But every time he manages to react and comes up to it, he's only got one man to mark in this race, the Tour de France this year, and that is Tony Rominger. And look, straight away they've gone clear.
Well, Rominger really hurt Indurain then, but he's hung on to that attack. But Rominger is a far better climber than Miguel. If he can produce another acceleration like that, we might at last prove to the world that Miguel Indurain is like the rest of us, Paul, and human.
Well, I think he is. 2 days ago, before the rest day, he did look to me as if he was suffering a little bit on those climbs going into Andorra, and you can see the grimace on his face. But these riders have had such a horrendous day today. It's one of the long stages of the mountains, 230 kilometers it's been, and Rominger is attacking again, trying to get rid of Indurain, and you can see it's not very often you see Indurain losing his posture like that. He's lowered the top part of his body, and he's giving everything to try and stay with his Swiss rider.
Superb riding by Rominger. I think somebody's had a talk with Tony Rominger yesterday and tried to make him believe in himself, that he is climbing the mountains better than Indurain, and the only way to beat Indurain is to constantly accelerate, and the stop-go racing is something that Indurain hates. He loves to ride at a rhythm, he hates the acceleration. Now the rest of the Tour de France suddenly blown away here. They've all gone with the acceleration of Rominger, and Miguel Indurain is hanging on. And this is Zenon Jaskula. This rider never ceases to surprise me. He suffers all of the time, but he hangs on in there. He's got Mechia on his back wheel, followed by Roche on the far right of the picture. And it looks as though Chiappucci might be in the spot of bother there alongside Stephen. Now, Stephen Roche will try to nurse Claudio Chiappucci, their teammates, and he'll see if he can bring him back up to those two leaders there.
Robert Miller's coming back, the man in third place on the road at the moment. You can see the little bobbing style of the Scot. Miller coming up. This is a great move for Miller, because if he can catch these two riders, the battle between them is going to be a tactical one, and we may well see that Miller will go straight by and try and get that victory in the mountains that he wants.
Well, really, if Miller is going to win in the Pyrenees, he's got to win today, because tomorrow, although we have two mountains, it's a long way down to the finish in Po, and I don't think the running will suit him. I think there might be a regroupment at the front, and so Miller needs to win today if he's going to win at all in this Tour. And he's coming back.
Jaskula, a little bit further down the slope there, has got rid of Alvaro Mechia, the man who was in second place on the roll. Claudio Chiappucci really suffering here, has been dropped by them all. Obviously paying for the efforts that he put in on the Col de Peyresourde a little bit earlier today.
So that violent double acceleration by Tony Rominger for the moment has settled down again. And here comes Jaskula joining Robert Miller, and the pair of them can now see the two leaders just up the road. And Indurain hanging on to Tony Rominger today, and I'm sure Rominger will go again very shortly.
He will definitely try, because he's got to keep going all the way up to the top of this climb. But the man who's doing the ride of the moment is the Scot Robert Miller. He can't quite get up to those two leading riders, but now that he's been caught by Zenon Jaskula, that might give him the little bit of psychological help to push it a little bit further. And if he can get to them, then it's a great chance for Robert Miller.
And this is a magnificent piece of riding by Zenon Jaskula, the Polish boy. He has ridden a fabulous Tour de France, and he might well be moving up into second place, because he's gone straight past Robert Miller. He's gone straight by him, and he's now trying to latch on to the Swiss-Spanish Express up the road there. This is Stephen Roche and Alvaro Mechia. Moto 3 tells us it's our third camera on the road, so they're a little way behind. Mechia now trying to conserve what advantage he's got. He's got 1 minute and 22 seconds in hand over Jaskula, and Jaskula is now ahead of him, and he could be slipping out of second place overall to the Polish rider, who is about to join the two leaders. Here he comes.
Well, that's a superb ride by this man, who is not renowned as one of the climbers of this race. He's coming up to the two riders in front, and Rominger has tried everything, and as soon as the road goes up again, I feel sure he will accelerate and try and get rid of Indurain. But Indurain has really had to pull out the stops. Look at the face of the man there. He's really suffering to stay in contact with Tony Rominger, the Swiss rider, in the polka dot jersey there.
For the first time, we've seen Indurain in pain. And now Jaskula has joined. Now, if Jaskula, who's ridden across this gap so well, has enough strength, there's two riders here now, can counter-attack the yellow jersey. Here comes Mechia, found his rhythm again after those accelerations by Rominger. Roche also is struggling now, but he's hanging on. and they're going well clear of the rest of what was a group of 27 riders at the start of this climb. We have 3 riders in the lead: Miguel Indurain, Tony Rominger, Zenon Yaskula, and then we go back to this chase group of 2, Alvaro Mejia and Robert Miller, and just behind Miller is Stephen Roche, and here he is. And Rominger has settled down, he's got his rhythm going, but he's going to have to produce another acceleration like he did at the bottom of the slope if he's going to open up the gap again.
Well, Roche is back. We're coming to the slightly easier part of the climb. The foot of this climb here, which is known as Planade, climbs up to the ski resort of Saint-Laurent, Soulan, really is vicious. And it seems now that the riders are starting to get into their own rhythm. Roche has come back to the Scot Robert Miller and Alvaro Mejia, but they are about 15 seconds down on the 3 leaders at the moment. A little bit of a traffic jam here in front of the 3 riders because the cars and the motorbikes just cannot get out of the way, and I'm sure that Tony Rominger was slowed down a little bit there.
Well, this is what the organisation does not want. They're very conscious of it. Now, I should imagine that the motorcyclists there will be getting an earful from the Radio Tour organisation, making them move away from the riders. And there's a beautiful face there, a shot there, Paul, of Tony Rominger's face.
Well, that's why he's suffering so much. They're actually increasing their gap. Came up at 30 seconds now as they went through the town of Soulan, which is about 5 kilometres from the finish.
And a good fight back by Andy Hampston. He's come up to the wheel here of Miller, Mejia and Roche. Under the 4 kilometres to go banner. Rominger in charge, but he hasn't done what he had hoped, and that was shake off the rider in yellow. And he's going to have to go again, because as we get close to the finish, Indurain will be saying to himself, well, you're not getting much time back on me, and I can afford perhaps to lose a little bit of time with the time trial to come. Over Tony Rominger, he leads him by 5 minutes and 44 seconds, and that really is an enormous amount of time now as this mountain begins to run out on the finishing line. An attack now by Roche, and Hampston in fact has let Roche go because he is trying to nurse Mejia to the top of this climb, and it's not a big gap at the moment, Paul.
Well, just as they go under the banner there for 4 kilometres to go, it's actually going to be around about 40 seconds. And it's a bad sign for Alvaro Mejia because Tony Rominger could well be moving up into a podium position today.
Well, Indurain, for the first time, is hurting and hurting badly here. Number 1 is winner of the Tour the last 2 years and going for a hat-trick. Here comes Roche.
Well, at 2 kilometres to go, it's still 20 seconds, but he's doing an incredible ride. He's looking extremely concentrated now. All he's thinking about is just getting up to those 3 riders in front. He had a bad patch at the bottom of the climb, and he really has got the pressure on Roche. Let's hope that he can get to the front there, because if it becomes a tactical sprint, as it has done before between these 2 riders, he may well come up with the goods.
1 kilometre to go, and here we have Tony Rominger still setting the pace towards the top of Planade. Indurain hurting but not dropping an inch on the lead here by Rominger, and the chase by Stephen Roche. He's under the kilometre to go. He sees the tails of the cars. This is a superb return of Stephen Roche. He could still surprise and snatch the stage.
Well, it's 15 seconds at the red kite there. All it takes now is for these riders at the front, Tony Rominger and Miguel Indurain, to start playing the little bit of cat and mouse that sometimes happens. I know Indurain would dearly love to win the stage. He wanted to win the second Alpine stage, and if Stephen Roche can continue to come back, all he needs is for these 2 riders just to slow down a little bit.
Now, just how badly is Indurain in trouble here, or will he have the strength now to take the stage?
Well, he looks as if he's gained a little bit of his composure again there. He looked down just to check his gears to make sure everything was all right. And you can see he's sitting up a little bit more comfortably. And now Rominger looking across to see what's happening for the sprint. And this is the ideal time for Stephen Roche. If they slow down a little bit, Roche could make that incredible comeback from behind. But now Rominger is on the front. He has to lead out the sprint. And I'm sure Indurain will try and come by him to take the victory.
Well, it's happened in reverse before now. I've seen Roche lose a classic race by playing cat and mouse, and a rider come from the back and pass him in Liège-Bastogne-Liège and take the sprint, and that was Moreno Argentin then. Now, can Roche do it to these 3? But I don't think so, because now the meters are ticking down quite quickly. 350 to go. Rominger wants to sprint. He's looked over his shoulder. He might well have seen Roche approaching, but he's holding off as long as he can. He wants really Miguel Indurain to start the sprint so he can have his back wheel, but Indurain is not going to do it. And watch out for Jaskula, who's gone. Zenon Jaskula goes. Rominger snatches the gear lever, takes on Jaskula. You see Indurain was in trouble. He can't hold the wheel. Indurain will concede, so be it, a few seconds on the line, but at least he's shown to us today that he is human, and he does crack if you race him the right way. Jaskula, brilliant win for him. Rominger is second, and then a couple of seconds down is Miguel Indurain. And now, as the camera tightens in on the bend, we'll see the lonely figure of Stephen Roche come around it. He'll just be a few seconds too late, but he's had a magnificent day in the Pyrenees today. And now he can stretch his back. Stephen Roche will be delighted with that. 4th place on the toughest stage of the race for him. Robert Miller taking 5th place, Andy Hampston 6th, and Mecchia will get 7th, but more importantly, just, and only just, by about 15 seconds or so, he'll keep his 2nd place overall. To Zenon Jaskula went for gold to become the first rider from Poland to win a stage ever of the Tour de France. They've held the yellow jersey once with Lech Piasecki. Now they have a stage winner in Zenon Jaskula. Tony Rominger there tried today to get rid of Miguel Indurain. He almost cracked him, but it didn't work out in the end for him. In fact, it was Zenon Jaskula scoring Poland's first ever stage win. Jaskula winning ahead of Tony Rominger, 3 seconds in front of Indurain. Roche was in 4th place. Robert Miller took 5th place on the day. Phil Anderson losing 13 minutes, but coming home well inside the time limit. Let's go now to Alan Piper on the finish line.
Andy, you did a great ride at the end. Did you know how dangerous it was for Mejia?
Yeah, I saw Mejia was in trouble. Of course, he was in trouble after I was in trouble, so I had to close the gap to get up to him. But, you know, I had to just go real steady and try to minimize the losses for him. He's been riding super, and today was his bad day. But, you know, he didn't lose so much. You know, and everyone has their bad day, so we just tried to keep it to a minimum.
But for you to get dropped, you must have been in real difficulty there, and then you had to fight your way back to him, right on the front, so you could take him up, and at one moment you nearly dropped him.
Yeah, there was, you know, when the attack went, I really couldn't go with it. You know, I was hoping to do some tempo. We were talking about it. If I was strong, I was going to do some tempo for him if he was feeling good so he could attack. But, you know, when the move went, I just didn't have the legs to go with it, but you know, it's an extra motivation when my own teammate's second. And, you know, it really gave me the fire that I needed to, you know, instead of just going super hard, I dug a little deeper, found another gear, and bridged up to the gap and helped Alvaro. So I'm grateful because, you know, my teammates do it for me all the time, and you know, it works. Sometimes I win the race, sometimes I don't, and I know they always give 100%. So here's a situation where I could help the teammate, and it was a pleasure.
Now we'll have a look at the overall situation tonight. It has changed slightly, although not in the order. Indurain still leads, but now by 4 minutes 28 seconds ahead of Mecchia. It was 3 minutes 23 at the start. Zenon Jaskula is closing in on Mecchia. Tony Rominger could close in on them both as we move towards the time trial stage at the end of the week. Bjarne Riis of Denmark struggled today, but hung on to 5th place overall. And Phil Anderson loses a little bit more time, but he won't be too worried about that. He'll be a happy man tomorrow night when we're out of the Pyrenees.